on everything that I did, starting from the very simple folk furniture to the more sophisticated designs of the doors, I would always try to keep that hand-built feeling to everything. The mark of the adze, the mark of the piel de cabezon, which I would use to sand it, which is a rough fish skin, they would leave a patina in the surface that was very rich and varied. Every single piece I made, I hand-planed every square inch of it. With my smoothing plane, I put a very, very fine belly and the curve of the blade so that you will leave a nice slick cut, but also you can feel a little undulation in the surface. When you sit down at a table and you put your hands on it and the table doesn't feel flat, you run your hands over it while you're eating and you feel the undulations in the surface, the wood becomes alive. And to me, this was very, very important. Some people might think that it's poor craftsmanship, but I think it's the opposite. Antonio and Nicolas were my two big mentors. Nicolas, a very super talented country craftsman from Yucatan, and the other, Antonio, he was from Seville, and he had been making since he was 12 years old and came from a long tradition of very fine Spanish furniture makers. I was making many trips to Mexico. I just loved Mexico, and I loved their arts and their crafts. I would travel into the little teeny cities and unknown places, and everything was in a search for doors and gates and furniture. And we found this one gate that was incredible, and I got on my brother-in-law's shoulders and photographed it from 12 feet in the air all the way to the bottom, and I redesigned it and made each leaf 8 feet wide and 12 feet tall, 800 pounds a leaf, 3 3/4 inches thick. I made them out of 16-quarter fir. Over a period of 50 years, I designed and built maybe 20 gates, and I would forge all of the hardware so that it had the mark of a hammer. And we would sandblast them first, which would eat out the soft grain. And it would mimic the appearance of the gates that I was seeing in Mexico that were 300-400 years old. When I got to around 29 years old, I decided I wanted to learn to carve. So I decided to go to Spain, to Seville, and we went into this little area called the Alameda, and here was this little gray-haired man working over a bench, and he was carving and putting together a chair. Watching him work, his hands and his tools were one and the same. He worked without hesitation. He could make a few lines on a piece of wood and carve a gargoyle within 15 minutes. We worked for 2 months, and it developed into a regular thing where every year, January and February, I would close down the shop and I would work with Antonio. I always felt that I was very fortunate to be able to make a living doing something that I really love. And I found that as the years went on, my life became my work, and my work became my life. They were one and the same. The showroom that I built was very much like an old Mexican mission, and I gradually filled it with pieces of my furniture. It was a very folk environment. I tried to make all my windows, my doors. I hand-planed the floors. I made the walls 3 foot thick, which I had learned in Mexico. It became a showroom and a living space for us. We lived with the pieces we built. In Kyo's finishes, she became interested in our work very much. And she had an artistic background coming from Japan. She can draw and paint beautifully. And over the years, Kyo became instrumental in the process and developed a fringe polish that she had learned from my teacher, Antonio, in Spain. As a person becomes more and more familiar with their craft, whether it's glass blowing, whether it's ceramics, whether it's wood, the tool is an extension of your hand, and you unconsciously scrape the wood, you adze it, you sand it, you plane it, you cut your dovetails, you put it together. It becomes almost like a song, and it becomes natural movements. And in the end, they would look at your work and they would say, this looks like it was just born, that it just came into being almost by itself. And that, to me, is one of the goals that every craftsman should shoot for.